What if a moment meant to honor a loved one became a stage for cruelty and favoritism? At her grandfather's funeral, while the rest of the family inherited a yacht, a penthouse, luxury cars, and a thriving company, one granddaughter was handed nothing but a small envelope, followed by her mother's mocking words that she had never truly been loved. They say family is supposed to be a safe haven. But when the deepest wounds come from the very people meant to protect you, should silence be accepted, or is it time to walk away and uncover the truth? Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always amazing to see where our stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next twist in this journey. Now, I'd like to invite you to listen to her confession. 1 week after my grandfather William Caldwell's funeral, I found myself standing in the polished lobby of Harold Whitman's law office in downtown Seattle. The air carried a quiet tension, the kind that settles over a room when grief intertwines with anticipation. I stepped into the conference room, believing that, if nothing else, I would receive something meaningful from the man who had always understood me better than anyone else in my family. My father, Richard Caldwell, sat at the head of the table with the confidence of a man certain of his inheritance. As the longtime face of Caldwell Shipping Company, he carried himself like its future owner already. Beside him, my mother, Margaret, dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, though the absence of real emotion was impossible to miss. Her attention seemed more focused on maintaining appearances than mourning her father-in-law. My older brother, Ethan, leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone with barely concealed impatience, while my cousin Olivia Bennett watched the room with a calculating smile, as if mentally spending money she had not yet received. Harold Whitman entered with a solemn nod, placing a thick folder on the table. His demeanor was calm and professional, a stark contrast to the restless energy surrounding him. As he began reading the will, the room seemed to hold its breath. My father was the first to be named. He inherited Caldwell Shipping Company, the very empire he had long expected to command. A subtle smile crossed his face as he exchanged a satisfied glance with my mother. Next, Margaret received the family's sprawling vineyard estate in Sonoma Valley, a property perfectly suited to her social ambitions. Ethan was granted my grandfather's prized collection of luxury cars along with a penthouse in New York City, and Olivia inherited a magnificent yacht docked in Palm Beach. With each announcement, the atmosphere shifted from solemnity to quiet celebration. Soft murmurs of approval and satisfaction filled the room. I listened patiently, reminding myself that my grandfather had always valued sentiment over extravagance. Perhaps he had left me something deeply personal, a letter, a keepsake, or a memory to hold on to. When Harold finally called my name, every gaze turned toward me, some curious, others tinged with pity. Instead of another thick document, he reached into his briefcase and handed me a small, unassuming envelope. For a brief moment, silence settled over the room. Then my mother let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Guess your grandfather didn't love you that much," she said, her tone light but cutting. Ethan smirked, and Olivia exchanged a knowing glance with him, their amusement barely concealed. The message was clear. In their eyes, I had always been the least significant member of the family. The words stung more than I expected, yet I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. I offered a polite smile, thanked Mr. Whitman, and excused myself from the room with as much composure as I could muster. Only when the elevator doors closed did I allow myself to breathe. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Monaco. Tucked behind it was a small card bearing my grandfather's familiar handwriting. "Trust activated on your 26th birthday. Time to claim what's always been yours." Beneath the note was a business card embossed with elegant lettering. Prince Alexander Laurent. Confusion quickly gave way to curiosity. My grandfather had never mentioned anything about Monaco, let alone a prince. Yet the deliberate nature of the message suggested that this was no whimsical gesture. It was a carefully planned move, one that hinted at a much larger design. As I left the building, I replayed memories of the countless chess games my grandfather and I had shared. He used to tell me that every move on the board carried meaning, that patience and foresight were the keys to victory. Standing on the sidewalk, the city buzzing around me, I realized that the envelope was not a dismissal. It was the opening move in a strategy only he fully understood. I decided then and there to keep its contents a secret. Whatever awaited me in Monaco, I would face it alone. For the first time since his passing, I felt not abandoned, but chosen. That evening, I returned to my modest apartment in Seattle, the small envelope clutched tightly in my hand. The familiar surroundings felt different now, as though the walls themselves sensed the shift in my life's trajectory. I placed the ticket and note on the kitchen table, and stared at them for a long time, torn between skepticism and hope. News of my meager inheritance had already spread through the family. My parents dismissed the trip as nothing more than a meaningless gesture. My father suggested it was likely a sentimental distraction with no real value, while my mother hinted that selling the ticket might be the most practical choice. Ethan went a step further, joking that I could use the money to finally upgrade my lifestyle. Their reactions only reinforced the realization that they had never truly understood either me or my grandfather. Alone in my apartment, I found myself revisiting memories of my childhood. My grandfather had often invited me to his study, where we spent hours playing chess and discussing hypothetical business discussed games. At the time, I believed these were simply bonding moments. Now, I began to wonder if they had been lessons, subtle preparations for something far greater. One particular memory surfaced vividly. After I had made a bold move on the chessboard, he smiled and said, "You must always think several steps ahead, Serafina. The real game isn't about the piece you move now, but the position you create for the future." Remembering those words, I realized that the trip to Monaco might be the continuation of a plan he had set in motion years ago. The decision to go was not immediate, but it soon became inevitable. The uncertainty that once frightened me gradually transformed into determination. If my grandfather had gone to such lengths, I owed it to him, and to myself, to uncover the truth. I packed a single suitcase, feeling as though I was stepping not just onto a plane, but into an entirely new chapter of my life. The experience of flying first class for the first time was surreal. From the spacious seat to the attentive service, everything contrasted sharply with the modest life I had always known. As the plane soared above the clouds, I felt a quiet sense of transformation taking hold. Perhaps my life had never been as ordinary as my family believed. Upon landing at Nice Côte d'Azur Airport, I followed the flow of passengers toward the arrivals hall. Amid the crowd, a sharply dressed chauffeur stood holding a sign that read, "Mrs. Serafina Caldwell." My heart skipped a beat as I approached him. "Welcome to the French Riviera, Mom," he said with a courteous nod. Then, with calm certainty, he added, "The prince wants to see you." The statement sent a wave of astonishment through me. My grandfather's connection to Monaco was far more significant than I had imagined. As the chauffeur escorted me to a sleek black car, I sensed that I was crossing an invisible threshold, from the familiar world of my past into a realm defined by power and influence. The drive along the Mediterranean coastline was breathtaking, but my mind remained fixed on the mystery ahead. Soon, we arrived at an elegant private office overlooking the harbor, where I was introduced to Prince Alexander Laurent. His presence was both commanding and reassuring, reflecting a man accustomed to responsibility and discretion. During our meeting, Prince Alexander explained that my grandfather had established an international trust when I was 16 years old. Designed to remain hidden until my 26th birthday, the trust named me as its sole beneficiary. As he presented the legal documents, the magnitude of the revelation began to unfold. The trust encompassed not only vast financial assets, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but also controlling interests in strategic businesses and properties around the world. The realization was overwhelming. For years, I had believed myself to be the overlooked member of the Caldwell family. Yet my grandfather had quietly entrusted me with a legacy far exceeding anything the others had received. Prince Alexander further clarified my grandfather's intentions. He had wanted me to grow up free from the distortions of wealth, to develop resilience and character before assuming such responsibility. Equally important, the secrecy of the trust allowed him to observe the true nature of each family member, revealing who valued relationships over material gain. As I reviewed the documents, I recognized that the countless conversations and games I had shared with my grandfather were in fact a carefully designed education. He had been preparing me all along to lead, to strategize, and to make decisions with wisdom and integrity. Standing on the balcony after our meeting, I gazed out at the shimmering Mediterranean Sea. The initial shock gradually gave way to a profound sense of purpose. I was no longer the underestimated granddaughter defined by her family's perceptions. Instead, I had become the steward of a remarkable legacy. With the legal formalities underway, a new thought began to take shape. My eventual return to Seattle. But this time, I would not return as the overlooked outsider. I would return as the rightful heir to my grandfather's vision, ready to take control of my destiny and redefine my place within the family. In that moment, I understood that the small envelope handed to me in that Seattle conference room had never been a symbol of rejection. It was an invitation. One that marked the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The morning after my meeting with Prince Alexander Laurent, I awoke in Monaco with a sense of disbelief that lingered like the fading echo of a dream. Yet the neatly organized folders waiting for me on the desk were unmistakably real. They represented not only immense wealth, but also a responsibility that would redefine the course of my life. Over the following days, I participated in a series of meetings with an international team of financial advisors, legal experts, and asset managers. Each session unveiled another layer of the empire my grandfather had quietly built. What initially seemed overwhelming gradually transformed into a structured and comprehensible network of global investments. Among the most significant assets was a luxury resort and casino overlooking the Mediterranean in Monaco, renowned for hosting some of Europe's most exclusive clientele. In the United States, I discovered controlling interests in a prominent hotel and casino complex in Las Vegas, a cornerstone of the hospitality and entertainment industry. Additional holdings included prime commercial real estate in London's financial district and high-value developments in Singapore, along with a diversified portfolio of international investments spanning technology, logistics, and renewable energy sectors. As I reviewed each document, I began to understand that my grandfather's vision extended far beyond accumulating wealth. His strategy reflected patience, foresight, and an intricate understanding of global markets. More importantly, it mirrored the lessons he had quietly imparted to me throughout my childhood. Memories resurfaced with newfound clarity. The countless chess matches we played were not merely past, but carefully designed exercises in strategy and anticipation. Every hypothetical business scenario he discussed with me, framed as simple conversations, had been part of a deliberate effort to cultivate leadership and analytical thinking. I realized that the greatest inheritance he left me was not financial but intellectual, the ability to think critically, lead decisively, and act with integrity. While examining the logistics sector of the portfolio, one particular file captured my attention: Caldwell Shipping Company. The financial reports revealed a troubling reality. Despite its outward appearance of stability, the company was burdened by significant debt resulting from an ambitious fleet expansion. Cash flow projections indicated increasing strain, and market analysts warned that, without intervention, the company could face bankruptcy or be acquired by external investors within 6 months. The discovery stirred a profound internal conflict. My family had consistently underestimated and dismissed me, yet the company represented my grandfather's legacy and the livelihoods of hundreds of employees. Allowing it to collapse would not only tarnish his memory but also harm innocent individuals who depended on its success. After careful deliberation, I concluded that preserving the company aligned with both my personal values and my grandfather's vision. With guidance from my advisors, I initiated a strategic plan to acquire Caldwell Shipping Company discreetly. To maintain confidentiality and prevent emotional interference, we established a holding entity named Neptune International Holdings. Through this structure, a formal acquisition proposal would be presented at a premium above market value, ensuring financial security for my father while safeguarding the company's future. Equally important, I intended to retain the existing management and workforce, preserving operational continuity and stability. As these plans took shape, I sensed a profound transformation within myself. The uncertainty that once defined me was replaced by confidence and clarity of purpose. I was no longer the overlooked granddaughter who had silently endured her family's indifference. Instead, I had become the steward of a legacy built on trust, wisdom, and responsibility. On my final evening in Monaco, I stepped onto the balcony of my suite and gazed across the shimmering Mediterranean Sea. The gentle rhythm of the waves mirrored the calm determination settling within me. The small envelope handed to me in that Seattle conference room was never a symbol of rejection. It was a key, one that unlocked the path toward becoming the person my grandfather had always believed I could be. With that realization, I began preparing for my return to Seattle, ready to embrace the role that awaited me. After completing all legal formalities related to the trust, I departed Monaco aboard a private jet arranged by Prince Alexander's office. As the aircraft ascended above the coastline, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation that had occurred in such a short time. I was returning to Seattle not as the underestimated woman my family believed me to be, but as someone entrusted with immense responsibility and influence. Despite this newfound power, I resolved to keep my true circumstances hidden for the time being, determined to observe my family's genuine behavior without the distortion of wealth. Upon my arrival, the familiarity of my modest apartment provided a comforting contrast to the opulence of Monaco. The small living space, once a symbol of limitation, now represented authenticity and grounding. Maintaining my usual routine allowed me to move unnoticed, preserving the anonymity necessary to execute my plans with precision. Shortly after returning, I received updated financial reports from my advisory team concerning Caldwell Shipping Company. The documents confirmed the severity of the situation. The company was struggling under the weight of substantial debt incurred from an aggressive fleet expansion strategy. Cash reserves were diminishing, and industry analysts projected that, without immediate intervention, the company faced a high risk of hostile acquisition within 6 months. This knowledge deepened my internal struggle. While memories of my family's dismissive treatment lingered, my grandfather's teachings guided my decision-making. Preserving the company was not an act of loyalty to those who had underestimated me, but a commitment to the legacy he had built and to the employees whose livelihoods depended on its survival. Consequently, I authorized my legal and financial teams to proceed with the formation of Neptune International Holdings, the entity designed to acquire Caldwell Shipping Company discreetly. The acquisition proposal was structured to exceed market valuation, ensuring that my father would receive a substantial financial benefit while allowing the company to stabilize under new ownership. This strategic initiative marked the first decisive step in redefining both the company's future and my position within the family. Before the formal proposal was submitted, I attended a family dinner at my parents' home. The evening unfolded much as it had in the past. Conversations revolved around social engagements, investments, and the advantages of their recent inheritances. My presence seemed incidental, and I was once again perceived as the modest schoolteacher with limited prospects. At one point, I gently inquired about the current state of Caldwell Shipping Company, referencing general market conditions and rising operational costs. My father appeared momentarily surprised by the depth of my question, offering a brief and somewhat defensive response before shifting the conversation elsewhere. My mother and brother exchanged puzzled glances, clearly unaccustomed to hearing me engage in such discussions. Their reactions confirmed that they remained unaware of the changes unfolding behind the scenes. Leaving the dinner, I felt a quiet sense of resolve. The disparity between their perception of me and the reality of my circumstances underscored the significance of the path I had chosen. This endeavor was not motivated by a desire for revenge, but by a commitment to responsibility and growth. In the weeks that followed, the acquisition proposal from Neptune International Holdings was finalized and officially approved for submission. As I reviewed the final documents, I experienced neither hesitation nor doubt. Instead, there was a profound sense of purpose and clarity. The decision represented more than a business transaction. It signified the beginning of a fundamental shift in the dynamics of my family. Standing by the window of my apartment, overlooking the familiar Seattle skyline, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The journey that began with a seemingly insignificant envelope had evolved into a defining chapter of my life. With calm determination, I authorized the submission of the acquisition offer, fully aware that the first move in a much larger strategy had just been made. In the weeks following my return to Seattle, life appeared outwardly unchanged. I continued teaching at the local school, maintaining the same modest routine that had long defined how my family perceived me. Beneath that calm surface, however, a carefully orchestrated plan was unfolding. From the quiet corner of my apartment, I participated in a series of virtual meetings with my international advisory team, monitoring every stage of Neptune International Holdings' proposal to acquire Caldwell Shipping Company. Each discussion required patience and precision. Legal teams reviewed contractual language, financial analysts assessed valuation models, and strategic consultants examined the long-term integration of the company into a broader logistics network. I approached every decision with a sense of calm determination, guided by the lessons my grandfather had instilled in me. This was not merely a business transaction. It was the preservation of his legacy and the protection of hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on the company's survival. The moment of truth arrived when Neptune International Holdings formally submitted its acquisition offer. Within days, my father received the proposal. The news spread quickly through the family, triggering a mixture of surprise and urgency. The offer exceeded market expectations, presenting a financial opportunity too significant to ignore. Family meetings were promptly organized to evaluate the situation, and somewhat ironically, I was invited to attend as a neutral observer. Sitting at the long dining table in my parents' home, I listened as they debated the merits of the proposal. My father expressed both skepticism and cautious optimism, while my mother focused on the social implications of such a substantial financial gain. Ethan viewed the situation through the lens of personal benefit, already imagining the lifestyle the sale might finance. Olivia, ever pragmatic, advocated for accepting the offer, emphasizing the stability it promised. During these discussions, I offered measured insights into industry trends, debt restructuring, and strategic positioning. My comments were framed as general observations, yet they reflected the depth of knowledge I had gained from my recent experiences. Gradually, the tone of the conversations shifted. My father began to regard my opinions with a newfound respect, occasionally seeking my perspective before making decisions. Although he remained unaware of my true involvement, the change signaled the first step in altering the family's perception of me. After several weeks of deliberation, my father made the difficult decision to accept Neptune International Holdings' offer. The signing of the agreement took place in the familiar setting of Harold Whitman's law office, the same room where my grandfather's will had been read. As I observed the proceedings, a complex wave of emotions washed over me. There was a quiet sense of fulfillment in knowing that the company would be safeguarded. Yet I also felt a deep empathy for my father as he relinquished what he considered his life's work. Once the transaction was finalized, Caldwell Shipping Company officially became part of my expanding portfolio. Despite the change in ownership, I ensured that the company's leadership structure remained intact. Through Neptune International Holdings, I instructed the board to retain my father as Chief Executive Officer. This decision was rooted not only in strategic continuity but also in compassion. I recognized his dedication to the company and believed that maintaining his role would foster stability while laying the groundwork for future reconciliation. With the acquisition securely in place, I turned my attention to another significant step, redefining my social and personal presence in Seattle. I reached out to one of the city's most respected real estate specialists to identify a property that would symbolize this new chapter of my life. After several viewings, I selected an extraordinary estate overlooking Lake Washington. The residence combined architectural elegance with panoramic views of the city skyline, embodying both sophistication and permanence. Signing the purchase agreement was a deeply symbolic moment. For years, I had lived within the constraints of modest expectations, defined by how others perceived me. This new home represented not merely financial success, but a declaration of independence and self-worth. As the final documents were executed, I felt a profound sense of readiness for the next phase of my journey, the moment when the truth would inevitably come to light. Standing in the empty foyer of the estate as preparations for my move began, I reflected on the path that had led me there. The seemingly insignificant envelope from my grandfather had set in motion a transformation that extended far beyond material wealth. With quiet confidence, I embraced the knowledge that the foundations for a new reality had been firmly established. Several weeks later, the moving trucks arrived at my new residence, filling the once silent halls with the sounds of careful preparation. As I walked through each room, watching the staff arrange furniture and artwork, I became acutely aware of the distance I had traveled. From the modest apartment that had defined my past to a home that reflected the magnitude of my present circumstances. Yet, despite the grandeur surrounding me, my thoughts remained focused on the impending confrontation with my family. When the house was ready, I extended an invitation to my parents to visit. I framed the gathering as a simple housewarming, offering few details about the property itself. Their arrival was marked by visible astonishment. As they stepped through the grand entrance and took in the sweeping staircase, expansive windows, and meticulously landscaped grounds, their expressions shifted from curiosity to disbelief. My mother was the first to speak, her voice tinged with both admiration and suspicion. She questioned how I could possibly afford such an estate on a teacher's salary. My father, equally unsettled, examined the surroundings with a mixture of pride and concern, clearly attempting to reconcile this reality with his long-held assumptions about me. Their inquiries soon evolved into direct questions regarding the source of my financial resources. Recognizing that the time for secrecy had passed, I calmly revealed the truth. I explained the existence of the international trust my grandfather had established when I was 16, and how it had been activated upon my 26th birthday. Presenting the supporting documentation, I outlined the scope of the assets now under my control, including global investments and business interests. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the revelation settled over them. The shift in the family dynamic was immediate and profound. The confidence and authority they had long exercised over me gave way to shock and disbelief. My mother struggled to process the information, while my father's expression reflected a complex blend of pride, confusion, and wounded pride. For the first time, I sensed that they were beginning to see me not as the underestimated daughter, but as an individual with her own agency and accomplishments. As the conversation continued, my father voiced a growing suspicion about the identity of Neptune International Holdings, the entity that had recently acquired Caldwell Shipping Company. With steady composure, I confirmed that I was the principal owner behind the acquisition. The revelation intensified the emotional tension in the room. My father questioned my motives, expressing feelings of betrayal and demanding that I return the company to him. I listened carefully before responding. I explained that my intention had never been to undermine him, but to preserve the company and protect its employees from potential collapse. I emphasized that he would remain in his role as Chief Executive Officer, ensuring continuity and honoring his years of dedication. While my explanation softened some of the initial shock, the emotional weight of the situation remained palpable. Gathering my resolve, I addressed the deeper issue that had shaped our relationship for years. I spoke openly about the pain of being underestimated and dismissed, recounting the subtle yet persistent ways in which I had been made to feel insignificant within my own family. My words were not driven by resentment, but by a sincere desire for acknowledgement and understanding. I made it clear that material wealth was never my primary concern. What I sought was respect and recognition of my worth. As the conversation unfolded, the emotional atmosphere shifted. The certainty that once defined my family's attitudes began to dissolve, replaced by introspection and regret. Recognizing an opportunity for genuine healing, I articulated a condition for moving forward, a public acknowledgement and apology for the hurtful actions and words that had shaped our past. This request was not intended as retribution, but as a necessary step toward rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. Unable to offer an immediate response, my parents eventually departed the estate in a state of quiet contemplation. Watching them leave, I experienced a sense of calm clarity. The confrontation had not been about asserting dominance, but about reclaiming my identity and establishing boundaries that honored both my grandfather's legacy and my own self-worth. That evening, as I stood alone on the terrace overlooking the shimmering waters of Lake Washington, I reflected on the profound transformation that had taken place. Financial power, I realized, was not the ultimate victory. The true triumph lay in the freedom to live authentically and to define my own place within the family narrative. The journey that began with a small envelope had evolved into a powerful redefinition of identity and purpose. While challenges remained, I sensed that the path ahead held the promise of reconciliation and renewal. With quiet confidence, I embraced the future, ready to witness the continued evolution of relationships that were finally beginning to be shaped by understanding rather than assumption. 1 week after the confrontation at my new home, the atmosphere within my family remained tense yet expectant. It was my father who finally reached out, requesting a formal meeting to resolve any misunderstandings. The choice of words was deliberate, suggesting both a desire for reconciliation and an attempt to regain some measure of control. I agreed to host the gathering at my estate in Seattle, understanding that this conversation would determine the future of our relationships. On the evening of the meeting, I stood in the grand living room, watching the soft reflections of Lake Washington through the expansive windows. Despite the elegance surrounding me, my thoughts were focused on the emotional weight of the moment ahead. I felt a calm determination. This was not about asserting dominance, but about establishing truth, respect, and clarity. When my family arrived, their demeanor reflected a mixture of hesitation and anticipation. My father, Richard Caldwell, carried himself with restrained dignity, though the strain of recent events was evident in his expression. My mother, Margaret, appeared anxious, her concern for social perception unmistakable. Ethan and Olivia followed closely behind, their attitudes wavering between curiosity and unease. Before the conversation began, I set clear expectations. I asked that everyone listen without interruption, refrain from making financial demands, and acknowledge the legality of the trust and my ownership of Caldwell Shipping Company. These boundaries were not imposed as a show of power, but as a foundation for an honest and respectful dialogue. To my relief, they agreed. My father spoke first. He admitted that the decision to sell the company had been driven by overwhelming financial pressure and years of exhaustion. His voice carried both vulnerability and pride. While his words expressed sincerity, I sensed an underlying hope that the company might somehow return to his full control. My mother followed, emphasizing her desire to restore harmony within the family, though her concern for public image remained evident. Ethan and Olivia expressed regret for their past behavior, yet their uncertainty revealed the depth of the transformation still required. When it was my turn to speak, I addressed the core issue that had defined our family dynamic for years. I explained that my actions had never been motivated by revenge or ambition, but by a commitment to preserving my grandfather's legacy and protecting those who depended on the company. More importantly, I emphasized that the true source of pain had been the persistent lack of respect and acknowledgement I had experienced within my own family. I then presented a condition for moving forward. Each family member would publicly acknowledge their past actions and offer a sincere apology. This was not intended to humiliate them, but to establish a new foundation built on equality and honesty. The request was met with silence. Ethan reacted first, his pride flaring, as he argued that such a public gesture would disgrace the family. He even suggested the possibility of challenging the legality of the trust, hoping to undermine my position. Prepared for this possibility, I calmly presented comprehensive legal documentation confirming the legitimacy and transparency of the trust and all associated assets. The clarity of the evidence left no room for dispute. Gradually, Ethan's resistance faded, and the reality of the situation became undeniable for everyone present. In an effort to demonstrate my commitment to unity rather than division, I made a significant announcement. I confirmed that my father would continue serving as Chief Executive Officer of Caldwell Shipping Company. Furthermore, the company would be integrated into my global logistics network, providing access to new resources, advanced technology, and expanded international markets. This decision transformed the narrative from one of conflict to one of collaboration, honoring my father's dedication while ensuring the company's long-term stability. The emotional atmosphere shifted as each family member began to reflect on their past actions. One by one, they accepted my request for a public apology. My father's acknowledgement was particularly moving. His voice carried a sincerity that signaled genuine understanding. My mother expressed regret for prioritizing social status over familial bonds, while Ethan and Olivia admitted their roles in perpetuating an environment of judgment and exclusion. As the evening drew to a close, a quiet sense of relief settled over the room. The balance of power within the family had fundamentally changed. I was no longer seeking validation. Instead, I had established my identity as an independent and capable individual. The meeting ended not with celebration, but with a shared recognition that a new chapter was beginning, one defined by mutual respect and the possibility of reconciliation. After my family departed, I remained on the terrace, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The city lights shimmered across the water, symbolizing both the challenges overcome and the opportunities ahead. I felt an unexpected sense of peace, knowing that the wounds of the past had finally been acknowledged. The public apologies that would soon follow promised to reshape not only our family dynamics, but also my standing within the broader community. 1 year later, the transformation within my life and family was unmistakable. Standing in the same Seattle estate that had once served as the setting for confrontation, I now experienced a profound sense of harmony and purpose. The passage of time had allowed wounds to heal and relationships to evolve, guided by the principles of honesty and mutual respect. True to their word, my family's public apologies were formally issued and widely shared through media and social platforms. The gesture resonated deeply within both the business community and the public, reinforcing my reputation as a leader who valued integrity and compassion. More importantly, it marked the beginning of a renewed family dynamic grounded in genuine understanding. My father adapted to his continued role as Chief Executive Officer with renewed enthusiasm. Supported by the resources of my global network, Caldwell Shipping Company experienced significant growth, expanding its operations and strengthening its position within the international logistics industry. Over time, our professional collaboration fostered a deeper personal connection. In a moment of quiet sincerity, my father admitted that he had underestimated my abilities and expressed genuine pride in the woman I had become. His willingness to learn from the strategic mindset my grandfather had nurtured in me represented a meaningful step toward healing our relationship. Ethan also underwent a remarkable transformation. Recognizing the value of personal growth, he approached me with a request to join one of the companies within my organization. Rather than seeking a privileged position, he asked to begin at an entry-level role, determined to earn his place through dedication and hard work. This humility marked a significant departure from his previous sense of entitlement and demonstrated a sincere commitment to change. Olivia redirected her ambitions towards socially responsible ventures, engaging in entrepreneurial initiatives and philanthropic efforts that reflected a newfound sense of purpose. My mother, Margaret, became increasingly involved in community activities, dedicating her time to charitable organizations and fostering stronger familial bonds. These individual transformations collectively signaled the emergence of a healthier and more supportive family environment. Inspired by my grandfather's enduring influence, I established the William Caldwell Foundation, an organization dedicated to providing educational opportunities for children from underprivileged backgrounds. The foundation embodied the values he had instilled in me: vision, compassion, and the belief that true wealth lies in the ability to create meaningful change in the lives of others. Through scholarships, mentorship programs, and community partnerships, the initiative quickly became a cornerstone of my philanthropic endeavors. The culmination of these changes was reflected during a family dinner held at my estate. As we gathered around the table, the atmosphere was warm and genuine, a stark contrast to the tension that had once defined our interactions. During the evening, my mother gently asked whether I had truly forgiven the family for the pain of the past. Her question prompted a moment of introspection. I realized that forgiveness was not solely about absolving others. It was also a means of liberating myself from the weight of past hurt. I responded with honesty, explaining that the challenges I had faced were instrumental in shaping my resilience and self-awareness. Rather than harboring resentment, I chose to view those experiences as catalysts for growth. This acknowledgement fostered a deeper sense of connection among us, reinforcing the strength of the bonds we were rebuilding. As I later stood alone on the balcony, gazing over the illuminated Seattle skyline, I reflected on the profound symbolism embedded within my journey. The small envelope I had received at my grandfather's will represented hidden potential and unwavering faith. Caldwell Shipping Company symbolized the continuation of family legacy and the transition between generations. My Seattle estate embodied the affirmation of identity and independence, while the William Caldwell Foundation served as a testament to the responsible and compassionate use of wealth. Ultimately, I recognized that the greatest victory was not measured in financial success or societal influence, but in the discovery of my authentic self. My grandfather's true legacy was not the empire he built, but the confidence he placed in my ability to lead with wisdom and integrity. With a sense of peace and anticipation, I looked toward the future. The journey that began with a simple envelope had transformed every aspect of my life, guiding me from a place of doubt to one of purpose and fulfillment. As the city lights shimmered below, I embraced the certainty that the path ahead would continue to honor the values that had shaped my story: resilience, compassion, and the enduring power of belief.